Hi everybody, welcome along to our 16th annual market update brought to you by the team at SMATS Group and myself, Steve Douglas. I've got your attention for the next hour as I walk through all of the issues that are affecting us in the world and hopefully give you an insight of what's going on behind the scenes, how it's going to impact you and how you can understand the chaos that's going on. This year we've entitled it From Russia with Love. Apt because obviously the war in the Ukraine has been on the march now for the last 12 months and it's impacting all sorts of things apparently. Oil prices, supply chain, and it's having a massive impact on a global sense. So I've called it that, but it's not the only issue we're facing. So we're going to cover a lot of ground today. Hope you enjoy it. Look forward to taking you on a great little journey. As always, I have to start with a disclaimer. Just a reminder that these are my personal views. All of the information is there to be for your information, for your interpretation. Please don't act upon it without seeking professional advice specific to your circumstances though. Let's get into it. As I always do with these update seminars, I'd like to start with what we said last time and see how we went overall. Now, last time, in terms of the four main food groups, we cover stock markets, currency, interest rates, and of course the Australian property market. With stock markets, I was predicting that we'd have a modest growth year. We ended up basically going flat, but we had high volatility, which was interesting. So pretty much got that right, and it's just a strange old situation, which we'll go in more detail. With the currency, I was confident we'd stay in that 70 to 75 cent range, and it pretty much did that the entire year, all the way through to October. Then it had a kick down to about 62 cents, which I thought was a crazy overreaction, and it turned out to be correct because it kicked back up over 70, and it's back settling under 70 cents at the moment. I still hold my views of 70, 75 cents. We'll talk about that a bit later, but pretty much on the mark there. With interest rates, I did say that we were going to get an interest rate lift sometime in this year, and I did say we probably wouldn't see it for 6 months, and sure enough, bang on 6 months after the seminar, the first increase came. Now, I think they've overdone the increases. We probably had too much too soon, and we'll talk about that more in detail, but it certainly had a confidence effect in the market, not necessarily a financial impact, but definitely a confidence effect, and we'll have a talk about that. Right, with the Australian property market, we've saw an unusual year. I still think the fundamentals are strong as we predicted, but we've seen a little bit of confusion in price points, largely because of those interest rate markets. But Queensland, which we predicted to be the strongest performer, led the way, did very, very nicely, as did Adelaide. And again, we'll go through in much, much detail. So overall, we got pretty much bang on last year, which was pretty good in a tough and a strange and unusual environment, particularly because no one saw the Ukraine war coming in November. It sort of popped up in December and through into March, and it's had chaos ever since. One of my favourite sayings for the year is I want to use that doesn't make sense. The world is getting crazier and crazier, and you might recall a couple of years ago we said that the world was going mad. It hasn't got any saner, but it's not making any sense, but it's making a lot of dollars for a lot of people. So let's see how that goes. Shifting in, before I get into talk about Russia and the effect of Ukraine, one of the big things I think that's going on in the world is the 4 I's, as I call them. And this is on a global basis and is also very impactful in Australia. So let's have a look at the 4 I's. And the first one, of course, is interest rates. So with interest rates, we've had that inevitable lift off the bottom, but for some reason, everybody is in massive panic mode about it. The reality is we are still well below our historic averages, but everybody is going crazy thinking that the end of the world is coming. No, you just had it too good for too long. So wake up and smell the coffee and realize that this is getting back to normal. We've also seen the tone of the conversation of interest rates being way too aggressive. The media in particular is pushing a message of negativity far, far beyond what it deserves. And that's having that negative effect on sentiment, confidence, and market activity. We look at inflation being the thing that's knocking everybody around the world. But I haven't believed in inflation for well over a decade. I think it's not called inflation anymore. To me, it's called greedflation. We're seeing prices kicking up. Now, some of that was inevitable from the fact that COVID saw prices go back in a lot of ways. It saw industries stop. So you're seeing a little bit of recovery of the losses of COVID in the inflation prices. But interestingly, people are paying these higher prices willingly. So it's not just that things have gone up and we can't help it. Some people are just profit taking in there. As a result, I worry about the RBA using monetary policy to chase inflation because I don't think it works anymore. That only works if it forces people's behaviours to change. And I'm not sure that we're going to see that for a number of reasons, including the fact that we're more affluent than we ever did as a general populace. The third eye to me is illusion. There was way too much misinformation, exploitations, media. It's making things impossible to predict, and that is largely fed by social media. And social media is now distorting issues, changing people's behaviour patterns, altering their thoughts and their psyche. It's making life heck of a hell for everyone on this planet. And we need to get to the bottom of it at some stage. And the last I is not quite the letter I, but it's eye-watering numbers. And that's what people don't realise. We've now got 8 billion people on the planet. We're trying to change 8 billion people's behaviour. We're trying to change the way we look at them, feed them, house them, accommodate them, move them. It's impossible with 8 billion people. And as a result, when you look at the numbers that are going up in the world, the trade volumes, the values of things, the spending power generally, I think we've gone past the point of return where I don't think it can be controlled. It's now an animal on the loose, and it just gets poked in different directions by people that benefit from that from time to time. So these 4 eyes are something that we have to come to terms with in the modern world. If we have a look at the scale of this, here's GDP. It's massive. Now the thing is, we've got a situation where they're telling us things are bad, but if you look at GDP, in 1985, 40 years ago, it was $13 trillion. In 20 years, it went from 13 to 39 trillion. By the time the global financial crisis came along, which is when we started doing these update seminars because we were worried about things, GDP in the world had grown to $61 trillion in just 6 years, from 39 to 61. If you look at the next global slowdown, it was still at 75 trillion. So the world is expanding economically all the time. And if you look at when COVID came in, at the bottom of the COVID epidemic, global GDP had already reached $85 trillion, and that's after it dipped during COVID. Now that's incredible when you consider that the whole world came to a standstill. Aviation stopped, tourism stopped, all things stopped around the world simultaneously, yet GDP barely fell a bit. And not only that, ever since COVID's now a thing of the past, look, we've already scooted up to $106 trillion of global GDP right now. And then if you look at just in 4 years' time, it's forecast to push to $131 trillion. Now this is massive momentum, massive economic power, and is accelerating because you're having so many of the poorer countries now come into wealth, so much more population moving to the middle class, and it is an unstoppable force, yet they tell us all the time how bad things are. What is bad is the distribution of the wealth. Who gets the share of what this is? That's the problem. The economic might is massive, and people should look at that in the true fullness of light and realise that what we're told isn't always what it seems. If you look at what's going on with Australia, we are 1.5% of global GDP, but we're only 0.3% of the population. So we're punching above our average, as is the USA. They amount to 24% of global GDP with just 4% of the world's population. Now that might give you some perspective as to why the USA is always trying to be the world's policeman, always trying to dictate terms about what's happening in the world, because it's trying to protect its dominance and market share. And people should not lose sight of that in all the things that are going on. If we have a look at inflation, just a classic example, here are the December 22 numbers for inflation. You can see it's starting to soften allegedly to 7.8%. Now bear in mind that the RBA's preferred range for inflation is 3 to 4%. It's a miracle that it stayed there for all these years, but now the genie's out of the bag. But if you look at where the contribution to inflation is, it's coming from all sectors. But you can see one of them is housing, which is added 10%. Now that doesn't include established house price growth, which last year we were talking about double-digit growth everywhere in Australia. But this is only new houses, new apartments. Now, one of the things there, if the government was genuinely serious about fixing things like inflation, fixing things like housing affordability, one quick lever they've got is to remove GST from new construction. If they did that, approximately an instant 6% fall in prices would occur, but more importantly, it would encourage people into the new market, which would create new supply, take pressure off the affordability crisis, create new supply, create new housing, and stabilise the market. But the fact that they don't talk about that shows that they have not got a level of seriousness about the equation. But you can see everywhere is impacted. But it's not surprising, and this is the thing that really gets me with the RBA. If you think about food and beverages, for example, food is an issue because we've had an era of floods and fires in Australia over the last 12 to 18 months. That's had an impact on the food chain. Transport has had fuel prices go up. That has an impact on prices. All of these things could find logical reason as to why inflation has gone up, yet no one's talking about the why and is it temporary. They're just saying bring out the big stick of interest rates and thump it on the head and see what happens. That's not good economic management. That's just single force, blunt instrument, hope for the best. Last time someone hit someone in the back of the head with a blunt instrument, it didn't work very well. But this is not surprising, and I would have thought the RBA would say, let's take a sensible, progressive approach rather than a quick fix with high uptake of interest rates in a short period of time. But we'll talk about that more later. And inflation is problematic, but the thing is people can afford these prices. And some of these price increases are due to people saying, I just want to sell my goods for more. Energy is a classic case. They're turning off power plants and saying, oh, there's not much supply, we have to charge more. Turn the machine back on, please. That's all we have to do. See how we go. If you have a look at what Russia has done, is Russia going into Ukraine pushed oil prices up there for a while. And I just want to show these eye-watering numbers because they're frightening. If you think of it, when Russia went to the border with Ukraine, oil prices went up about $20 a barrel. When they went across the border, went up about $40 a barrel. Now, again, if you put that into perspective and think, okay, ideology, are they invaders? Are they this? Are they that? Or are they just manipulators? Okay? Maybe it's just because of money. Hate to say that. But if you think about it, here is the oil production every year on a per day basis. So you can see Russia produces 10 million barrels a day. If oil goes up $20 a barrel, that's worth to them about $200 million a day. $1.5 billion a week. If they get it to $40 a barrel, you can see that's worth $3 billion a week. Now, I don't know who gets all of that, but it filters around. It's going somewhere, maybe into some high-ending place. But this is frightening. Now you'd say, well, how can they put it off? How can they let that happen? Well, don't forget, if oil price goes up, it's not just Russia that benefits, it's everybody. Here is the US. It produces the most oil on the planet. A lot of people don't realize that. They always think, oh, it's Saudi or it's someone else. No, it's America. So America produces 19,000 barrels a day, 19 million barrels a day. That's worth $2.5 billion a week of extra money. It doesn't cost any more to produce it. You just sell it for more. And if it's $40, that's $5 billion a week extra revenue. Now, this is where the eye-watering numbers affect us in so many ways. If you can move a price for a short period of time on a high-volume item like oil, someone has changed the distribution of wealth for that period. That $19 billion is coming from somewhere, and that's shared between just the top 10 oil producers of the world. $19 billion a week, more there instead of there. Now guess where it came from? You and I. Every time we filled up that Bowser. I think at the height in America they said, Do your bit for Ukraine. Pay it at the bowser. You're fighting Russia. That's your way. No, you're putting money in someone's pocket. They didn't need to lift oil prices, but oh well, we might as well benefit accidentally if it happens. So it makes you a bit concerning there. But those numbers are indeed eye-watering. If you have a look at the oil price, here we go, back in 2022, it was sitting around that $70 to $60, $80 a barrel in value. Move your troops up to 120 so quickly. Now again, this is just factual, but trying to remember, it's March when I'm doing this video. Is the war over in Ukraine? Apparently not. But somehow the oil price has come back to $76 a barrel. So if it went up during a war and the war's not over, how can it be down? And again, look at that temporary shift. Now that you could argue that we're being looked after by good governance and they're helping us and doing their thing to keep it, I'm not so convinced. This is just shifting of a commodity. Someone benefited pretty significantly. If you look at the Australian average fuel price at the pump, you can see it roughly correlates with that graph, but we're still quite high even though oil price has gone back low. And again, if you look at the stats, just for reference, when oil's at $80 a barrel, it's cost roughly 50 US cents a litre. Just out of reference. None of us ever check these things. You know, it going up to 120 adds 25 cents a litre base cost. It doesn't push everything else up, that stayed the same. But it pushes our price up usually by more. Interestingly, in Australia, the government, Liberal at the time, said let's help everybody out from this war apparition price lift, and they took the fuel excise to half during that period from March to September of 2022. But strangely enough, it wasn't enough to suppress the price growth. Now, there was watchdogs checking that there was no gouging. I'm not sure how much checking they did, but it's still high. And when you consider that oil is back to normal, yet when I turn on the news, no one tells me that. When it goes up, it's the first story that they lead with. When it goes down, no need to mention it. Let's just keep going. And as long as we don't complain too much at the bowser, everything's fine. If you have a look, you know, apparently around about April or so, 22, there was a little yacht in the Mediterranean being built. And I think it was for someone living in Moscow, I'm not sure, but it was costing $700 million. And that doesn't include the helicopters to sit on the 2 heliports. But maybe I needed to generate a little bit of extra cash flow to help do that. Pure coincidence, probably got nothing to do with it, but this is the world we live in. It's all shifting, it's all emerging, it's all confusing. And that's our little Russian present. But if you look at the current state of play, this is why it's getting so hard. You know, confusion and misdirection are now ever present in everything we do. You know, it's hard to know what's going on. Things that should happen don't happen. Things that happen, you know, just are crazy. But, you know, I think that's a large to do with social media because that's our information source. And it's a chicken and egg environment. Are we, you know, responding to the news or is the news responding to us? I don't know. It could be both. But certainly it's influencing direction, it's influencing behavior, and that's the thing. Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing because it can make an overnight millionaire out of Justin Bieber. But for most of us, we're not going to get that sort of economic benefit. We're just going to be part of the machine, and we need to think about how we handle social media. You know, one of the reasons for that is because we've moved into the era of digitization and we're just entering the era of artificial intelligence. Now, a lot of people don't realize the full impact of AI, but what it does is it lets them analyze that information far quicker than ever before. So before, if I had data, I had to have a whole bunch of people in a room and process it and analyze it and then get a report and then say, hey, what should we do with this? And it could take months, years, weeks. The census used to take 2 years to come out once they did it. Now it comes out in months. But AI is going to make that days, weeks, minutes. And that's what technology does. As that information becomes digitized, its ability to be analyzed instantly and therefore shift direction, alter path, disseminate information to move is rapidly changing. And that's the big gamble we've got moving into this age of AI, is what are we going to do with it and how's it going to help us or hurt us? That's the big question. As a result, the old rules no longer apply. Anything you think you knew about anything of the yesterday, you're done. Forget about that. It's influencing, it might influence your character, but it isn't going to influence the world anymore. So you have to start thinking more like today. It's a bit like I always remember people say, oh, how are the young people ever going to afford a house? Easily. They have parents with deposit, they have higher paid jobs. That's how they're going to do it. They're going to struggle, absolutely. But we always struggled right from the very first day to today. It's always been a struggle to buy a house. It should be a struggle to buy a house. It's a house. It's meant to be hard. But no, things are getting easier because you've got methods. Doesn't make it any better, but it certainly is easier. So learn what's going on in this new thinking environment, because there's lots going on. And I think one of the biggest problems that I have in the current age is good government is absent, completely absent. In fact, I think they're participants now. We can't rely on it. And if you look at the quality of leadership around the world, it's not getting any better, which is tragic. But again, chicken and egg. Do we deserve these leaders, or did we create these leaders to give us what we deserve? I'm not so sure. It's one or the other, up to you to decide. But someone has to step in and say, hey, turn that power plant on. Stop doing that. Hey, stop manipulating the stock market. Hey, do that with fairness. And again, get hold of the numbers. Because what government is spending on things now is out of control. Billions and billions of dollars on all sorts of things, because it sounds good politically to announce, hey, we're spending this billion on that, and no one's saying, what did we get for it? That's the key. Not how much we spent, what did we get for it? And we have to come back as a society into that box. Social media was meant to help us with that. I'm not sure, because there's players behind the scene where we liberalised ourselves and then the power got control of it and turned it against us, just when we thought it was the right thing. If we have a look at that, I'm not here to get you to protest. I'm not here to get you to get up in arms and rebel and say, let's go down with placards. Quite the opposite. I don't think there's any reason to concern about the way the world works. It's happening, it's going on, but we're generally getting better. What is happening is the people that need to be looked after aren't getting looked after as well as. There's a bit of a facade, but it's just the reality. But again, I don't think things have changed that much from when I was young. That used to happen there, it just wasn't as obvious or intent. But you have to realise that you are responsible for yourself. Don't worry about what's going on, but what you do need is a much, much higher level of awareness as to what's going on. Hopefully something like this event is going to give you some things to think about. I'm not here to tell you everything. I'm here to poke you in the brain and make you think about what's going on. The world is going to change. The world is going to evolve. The world is going to be abused. You're going to have confusing points. So find a way to get some level of sensible awareness, not necessary through social media, but through watching the actual interviews of people, reading, analysing, looking at real numbers that make a difference, and not getting distracted in the noise. So all in all, the world is just how it's been for the last few years. Crazy as, but it's our world. We made it. We have to live in it. Let's not worry about it too much.